In the early hours of Monday, March the 2nd, 2026, Hezbollah did something it had not done in more than a year. It fired rockets and drones toward a military site south of Haifa. Not a skirmish, not an incident, a deliberate announced military operation framed in an official Hezbollah statement as retaliation for the assassination of Iran's supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, and the statement said, "In defense of Lebanon and its people." That was Monday. By Tuesday morning, Israel had sent ground troops back into southern Lebanon, issued evacuation orders for more than 80 villages, killed at least 52 people in airstrikes in the first 24 hours of this new escalation, and was conducting what its military called Operation Lion's Roar, striking approximately 600 military infrastructure sites linked to Iran in Lebanon, using more than 2,500 munitions inside a single day. And while all of that was unfolding on the Israeli-Lebanese border, something else was happening 40 kilometers to the east, on the mountains that form Lebanon's border with Syria, that has received almost no coverage in the avalanche of news from this conflict, but that changes the geographic scope of what is happening in a way that cannot be overstated. Syria, the government of Ahmed al-Sharaa, the former opposition commander who toppled Bashar al-Assad 4 months ago and is now attempting to build a functioning state out of the ruins of a 14-year civil war, has reinforced its border with Lebanon with thousands of troops, armored vehicles, and short-range Grad and Katyusha rocket launchers deployed along the western Homs countryside and south of Tartus. 8 sources confirmed this to Reuters on Tuesday. 5 Syrian military officers, a Syrian security official, and 2 Lebanese security officials. Military formations from the 52nd and 84th Divisions of the Syrian Army have expanded their presence along that border. The reinforcement operation began in February and accelerated dramatically in recent days. A second front has not opened yet, but the geography of a second front is being prepared while the first one burns. Pull back from the mountains along Lebanon's eastern border for a moment and look at what this conflict has become on its 4th day. Operation Epic Fury began as an American-Israeli air campaign against Iran. It has now produced active ground forces operating inside Lebanon. A renewed Hezbollah war that had been frozen by a November 2024 ceasefire, Syrian military formations massing along Lebanon's border with rocket artillery in place, the closure of American embassies across the Middle East, the declared closure of the Strait of Hormuz, drone strikes on American diplomatic compounds in Riyadh and Kuwait City, the evacuation of non-emergency U.S. personnel from 6 countries, and evacuation advisories for citizens across 13. This is not escalation in the clinical sense that analysts use the word to describe an incremental increase in pressure. This is the simultaneous ignition of multiple distinct conflicts that have been in a state of suppressed potential for years, all triggered by the same 72-hour window when the first bombs fell on Tehran and Khamenei was killed, and Iran's strategic calculus changed from deterrence to retaliation. The Lebanon front is not a sideshow to the Iran conflict. It is the Iran conflict's second front, and it arrived with a logic and a force that anyone who understood Hezbollah's relationship to the Islamic Republic could have predicted, because Hezbollah did not break its ceasefire casually. It did so in explicit, declared response to the killing of the man whose government had financed it, armed it, trained it, and defined its entire strategic purpose for 4 decades. To understand what is happening in Lebanon right now, and why the Syria dimension makes it categorically more dangerous than it would otherwise be, you need to understand who the 3 principal actors are, and what each of them wants from this moment. The first actor is Hezbollah. After the catastrophic losses of the 2023-2024 war, Hassan Nasrallah killed in September 2024, Hashem Safiaddin killed shortly after, the entire senior leadership decapitated, the group's financial infrastructure severely damaged, significant portions of its tunnel network and weapon stockpiles in southern Lebanon cleared by the Lebanese armed forces, and a ceasefire that required withdrawal from south of the Litani River. Hezbollah rebuilt. Iran continued to supply it. IRGC officers, according to Arab media reporting from February 21st, had taken responsibility for supervising Hezbollah's military preparations in anticipation of exactly this kind of Israeli or American escalation. The ceasefire had been violated by Israel on a near-daily basis for 15 months. Lebanese Health Ministry confirmed 397 people killed in Israeli strikes in Lebanon after the ceasefire took effect, and before Hezbollah launched its latest attacks on Monday. Hezbollah endured all of that. It did not respond. Its senior official, Mohammed Komati, said Tuesday, with a directness that deserves to be heard, "The Zionist enemy wanted an open war, which it has not stopped since the ceasefire agreement, so let it be an open war. The era of patience," Komati said, has ended. Hezbollah's patience was not a sign of weakness. It was strategic restraint, held in reserve for exactly the moment it now faces, when its primary patron and political patron has been killed, when Iran's retaliatory campaign has opened every front simultaneously, and when restraint would communicate not caution, but abandonment of the cause that defines the organization's existence. The second actor is Israel. The IDF's movement of ground troops into southern Lebanon on Tuesday was officially described as a reinforced forward defense, not an invasion, not an occupation, a tactical forward positioning to create what the military spokesman called an additional layer of security for northern Israeli communities. Elements of the 91st Division were deployed to strategic points along the border inside Lebanese territory. The IDF Arabic language spokesman Avichai Adre issued evacuation orders for more than 80 Lebanese villages and towns, warning residents not to return until further notice. Israel simultaneously called up approximately 110,000 reserve troops on Tuesday, a mobilization that signals preparations for a potentially prolonged multi-front escalation, not a limited tactical adjustment. The IDF said Operation Lion's Roar had struck approximately 600 military infrastructure sites linked to Iran and Lebanon, using more than 2,500 munitions in a single day. It struck Hezbollah's TV and radio station building. It struck Hezbollah command centers and weapons storage facilities in Beirut's Dahieh neighborhood. The strikes hit without warning on Tuesday afternoon, producing the wave of displacement that Al Jazeera's Heidi Pett described from Beirut. Schoolchildren unable to go to school because the schools were full of the 30,000 people who had sought shelter since Monday, civilians in traffic jams on roads leading out of the south, people sleeping in their cars because there was nowhere else to go. Israel also announced the killing of Reza Kazai, identified as Hezbollah's military escalation officer and the chief of staff of the Quds Forces Lebanon Corps. The man described as the key liaison between Iran's Revolutionary Guard and Hezbollah's weapons procurement and transfer network. His killing, in an airstrike on Beirut, removed the single most important operational link between the Iranian supply chain and Hezbollah's military capacity in Lebanon, at the precise moment when that supply chain's viability is already being contested across every other domain of this conflict. The Lebanese government's position in all of this is perhaps the most agonizing of any of the parties involved, because the new Lebanese state, led by President Joseph Aoun and Prime Minister Nawaf Salam, both of whom represent the reformist, sovereignty-focused political vision that emerged from the October 2019 protests and the catastrophic August 2020 Beirut port explosion, has spent the past several months doing exactly what the United States and Israel have demanded. The Lebanese armed forces cleared more than 10,000 rockets, 400 missiles, and 205,000 unexploded ordnance from south of the Litani River as part of the National Shield disarmament plan. The LAF announced in January that it had operational control of the area south of the Litani, except for territory still occupied by Israeli forces in 5 border points. Lebanon elected a new president and new government that committed publicly to reasserting the state monopoly on the use of force and disarming Hezbollah. And then, this week, Hezbollah fired rockets at Haifa anyway, from areas north of the Litani River, from territory that the Lebanese government says it has not yet been able to disarm because Hezbollah's presence north of the river was not covered by the ceasefire's south of Litani framework. Lebanese President Aoun told the ambassadors of Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the United States, France, and Egypt on Tuesday that Hezbollah was firing from north of the river and that the Lebanese government had declared Hezbollah's military activities illegal and called on security forces to prevent attacks originating from Lebanese territory. He said the decision was final and that there was no turning back. Hezbollah responded to the Lebanese government's declaration that its military activities were illegal with a statement of breathtaking institutional contempt. We understand the Lebanese government's impotence in the face of the brutal Zionist enemy. Impotence? The word is not accidental. It is Hezbollah describing the Lebanese state's authority over its military activities in the precise term that captures their actual relationship. The government can declare things illegal, it can issue bans, it can call on security forces, and Hezbollah will observe none of it because the Lebanese state does not have the military capacity to enforce any of it, while Israeli aircraft are conducting strikes without warning in Beirut's southern suburbs and 30,000 people are sleeping in their cars on roads leading north. The Lebanese army, tellingly, did not attempt to stop Hezbollah's rocket fire. It pulled back from at least 7 forward operating positions along the Israeli border on Tuesday, a Lebanese military source confirmed to Al Jazeera. Withdrawing to ensure its own troops' safety amid an escalation it has neither the mandate nor the means to control. Now, the Syria question. 8 sources, including 5 Syrian military officers, confirmed to Reuters on Tuesday that Syria has deployed thousands of troops, armored vehicles, Grad rockets, and Katyusha rocket launchers to its border with Lebanon, specifically in the western Homs countryside and south of Tartus, the mountainous terrain that forms the natural boundary between the two countries. The official explanation from Syrian military sources is simultaneously specific and revealing. The deployment is aimed at preventing Hezbollah from infiltrating Syria, blocking arms smuggling across the border, and defending Syria from any attack that Hezbollah or other Iran-backed militants might launch toward Syrian territory. A senior Lebanese security official told Reuters that Syrian authorities had communicated to Beirut directly that the rocket launcher deployment along the mountains was a defensive measure against any action or attack that Hezbollah might launch against Syria. Read that statement carefully. Syria is deploying rocket artillery specifically to defend against Hezbollah. This is extraordinary because it describes a Syrian government that came to power largely because Iran and Hezbollah sustained Bashar al-Assad through 14 years of civil war, and that is now pointing rockets at the organization that helped keep Assad's regime alive for over a decade. The new Syrian government under Ahmed al-Sharaa has been attempting, with considerable difficulty, to establish a functioning state apparatus while managing multiple competing armed factions, maintaining access to international sanctions relief, and navigating its relationships with neighboring powers, including Turkey, Israel, and the Gulf states. Hezbollah and Lebanon have not been natural allies of this new Syrian government. Hezbollah supported Assad and fought against the opposition forces that al-Sharaa once led. The Syrian security official told Reuters, Syria wants balanced relations with its neighbor after decades of strained ties. But balanced relations coexist uneasily with thousands of troops and rocket launchers on the border, and European and Lebanese officials told Reuters they were concerned about the possibility of a Syrian incursion into Lebanon. Syria vehemently denied it. The Syrian security official said Damascus has no plans for military action against any neighboring country, but added the qualifier that has become the most important qualifier in the Middle East this week. But Syria is prepared to deal with any security threat to itself or its partners. There's a historical resonance to what Syria is doing that the official military explanation papers over and that the Lebanese political memory cannot ignore. Syria had troops stationed in Lebanon from 1976 until 2005, 29 years of Syrian military presence that encompassed Lebanon's civil war, the Israeli invasions of 1978 and 1982, the Taif Agreement, the assassination of Rafik Hariri, and finally the Cedar Revolution that forced Syrian withdrawal under international pressure. The generation of Lebanese political leaders who negotiated Syria's departure in 2005 and built the post-Syrian occupation state are still alive, and many are still in office. They watched the Syrian civil war from 2011 with a complex mixture of fear, relief, and guilt about Hezbollah's participation. They watched Assad fall in December 2025 with emotions no Lebanese politician can easily describe publicly. And now they are watching Syrian military formations with rocket artillery massing on the mountains east of Lebanon, while Israeli forces with 110,000 reserve call-ups conduct ground operations from the west. Lebanon, a country of 6 million people with a dysfunctional government, a bankrupt economy, a military that withdrew from 7 border positions on Tuesday, and a state that just declared illegal the actions of the largest armed force on its territory, that Lebanon is now being approached from 2 directions by armies that each claim defensive intent and each have historical reasons to view Lebanese territory as a legitimate operational space. The United Nations Interim Force in Lebanon, UNIFIL, has been in southern Lebanon since 1978. Its mandate is to confirm Israeli withdrawal, restore international peace and security, and assist the Lebanese government in reestablishing its authority in the south. On Tuesday, with Israeli ground forces moving into positions inside southern Lebanon and Hezbollah declaring open war, UNIFIL was doing what it has always done in the face of escalations it cannot prevent, observing. Its 10,000 troops from contributing nations including France, Italy, Spain, Germany, and Indonesia do not have the authority to intervene between Israeli forces and Hezbollah. They have the authority to observe and report. They are now observing an Israeli ground incursion, Hezbollah rocket fire from north of the Litani, Syrian military formations massing from the east, a Lebanese army that has pulled back from the border, a Lebanese government that has declared Hezbollah illegal while lacking the capacity to enforce the declaration, and the largest American air campaign in a generation operating in the airspace above all of it. UNIFIL's Secretary of Staff told reporters Tuesday that the force was in contact with all parties and urging restraint. Restraint. 30,000 displaced people, 80 villages under evacuation orders. Hezbollah saying the era of patience has ended and let it be an open war. This is what the call for restraint looks like when it is received. There is a Lebanese family somewhere in the village of Ainata in southern Lebanon right now. Naji Dawood and Dana Horani, reporting from Adamasser, described what happened in that border village in the early hours of Tuesday. A woman named Batul Ismail was awoken by her mother shortly after midnight as the escalation intensified. She did not know then that by Tuesday afternoon her village would be under an Israeli evacuation order, that the Lebanese army would have pulled back from positions near her community, or that an army she had never confronted was deploying rocket artillery on the mountains visible from her window to the east. She knew only that the sounds she was waking up to were the sounds that every Lebanese family in the south has memorized across 3 generations of wars: aircraft above, distant explosions, the vibration that travels through stone walls before the sound arrives. She had lived through the 2006 war. She had lived through 2023 and 2024. She had watched the ceasefire of November 2024 hold for 15 months while Israeli drones struck nearby and her government counted the dead. And she woke up on Tuesday, March 3rd, 2026, to find that the ceasefire she had organized her life around was gone, and the wars on 3 of her country's borders were all happening simultaneously, and the questions that have never been answered for any Lebanese family in any generation — how long, what for, who decides when it ends — were unanswerable again. 30,000 displaced, 80 villages evacuated, 110,000 Israeli reserves mobilized, thousands of Syrian troops with Grad rockets on the eastern mountains, the 91st Division at strategic points inside southern Lebanon, Hezbollah launching drones at Ramat David Air Base at dawn. And none of the governments making decisions about what happens next on any of these fronts have presented a credible plan for what de-escalation looks like, who negotiates it, or what it would require from each of the parties whose forces are now in contact across a geography that has been a laboratory for regional catastrophe for 50 years. This is day 4. The map is still expanding.